everyone. I am Melanie McDermott. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Storyshares. And I am so excited that you're joining us for our webinar today, which is all about UpLIFT, which is how our new intervention curriculum, LIFT, Literacy Intervention for Teens, is creating coherence between intervention and grade level core curriculum. And I'm so excited to introduce our Chief Academic Officer, Shira Engel. You can take it away, Shira.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm really excited to be here with all of you today to talk about how we merge intervention and grade level rigor within the context of LIFT. This is part two of a two-part series. We may create more based on questions that come up from today. We really try to be very responsive with these webinars. So as I go through a few of questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and we will use those questions to inform future webinars. Part one of this was looking at creating coherence between intervention and core curricula by hearing from teachers from all over the country and Louise, the CEO of Storyshares. And that was a panel discussion, and that is available on our website. That does not talk about LIFT specifically. It talks about intervention and core curricula much more broadly. There is a teacher who participated in New York City, a teacher in Wisconsin, and then the founder of Storyshares to really look at how all of those work together. So today we're going to get very granular and look very specifically at the Storyshares Literacy Intervention for Teens LIFT program and how we do that within the context of that program. So I am going to do some quick introductions to the topic and to myself. We'll do an overview of the Storyshares LIFT program. We will talk very specifically about the decoding pathway in that program and how that pathway connects back to grade level rigor. We will do the same with the second program pathway, which is fluency, and how that one connects back to grade level rigor. We will share additional resources, and we will, of course, make time for a Q&A. So I am Shira. I'm the Chief Academic Officer at Storyshares. I am a former middle school humanities teacher and literacy interventionist. I shared this on the last webinar, but this is a topic that is really near and dear to my heart. I felt as a middle school teacher who became a dyslexia specialist based on a need I found in my classroom. I often felt like I had two completely separate identities as an educator. I had my identity as a general education teacher, where I taught humanities, reading, writing, and social studies by day. And then by night, I would do dyslexia tutoring after school. And really work within the context of tier three, primarily intervention programs and some tier two programs. I did not find that my work intersected in the way that I wanted it to. And that is often because of this key challenge between reconciling the grade level material that we get in core curricula with foundational skills that students need in order to access that material. So I'm really looking forward to speaking about this with you all, and I would love to learn a little bit more about the folks who are in the space today. This is a webinar style, so we won't be sharing this out. But just so I know who I am speaking to, if you could navigate over to the Q&A, you're welcome to also share a question, and just share what subjects and age groups you teach. That will help me really direct our work today. So I'm going to give everyone a moment to do that. Okay, thank you so much. All right, I see middle school, I see middle and high school. This is going to touch on those two big buckets, and really also look at how we differentiate the lessons for those groups. So I'm going to give everyone some think time. Same deal. You can type it into the Q&A or you can just use this as a moment to just think through this. What comes to mind when you hear the words core curriculum? Okay, so I am hearing some really great responses in the chat. So really looking at the curriculum that applies to all subjects that students are using in their core content areas. So science, math, history, and I'm hearing a little bit about the instruction that comes with a core curriculum being prescriptive, but not necessarily as prescriptive as an intervention. Okay. And now I would love for everyone to have some quick think time and share any answers that you feel like sharing. What comes to mind when you hear the word intervention? And if you are doing this webinar asynchronously, really use this as think time. So I'm going to give everyone about 15 seconds, but just take a moment, think about what comes to mind when you hear the word intervention. That will help us as we navigate through the rest of this material. Okay, so I'm hearing some things about remediation, about really looking at individual student needs, supplemental and additional support and instruction, using the language of tiers and MTSS. Okay. So I'm going to give an overview of LIFT, which is literacy intervention for teens. And we're going to zoom in first on that, like on that on that intervention piece and why we are creating LIFT at Storyshares. This is going to be an overview that will be review for folks who already know about LIFT. But it is a necessary review for connecting it back to some key pieces of really bringing coherence between intervention and core. So, LIFT is a unique adolescent literacy intervention program to fill a significant white space in the greater market of adolescent literacy interventions. There are a lot of amazing literacy intervention programs that are highly effective. And they are often for students who are in grades 3 through 12. That is, or grades 2 through 12 in a lot of cases. That is a huge range. And when we look um, at the challenge of creating something that works for everyone, sometimes the response is to try to literally do that by creating something that is universal enough to work for that wide of an age group of students. And when that happens, this is at least the experience I had as an educator. When we try to create something that works for everyone, we end up creating something that doesn't fully work for anyone. Um, Older students are really, really, really good at knowing when something was not made with them in mind, both from a curricular standpoint and when it comes to representation within that curriculum. So we created LIFT because we heard about the need for a really cohesive intervention program that brings together the multiple identities that older striving readers hold. And one of those identities that older striving readers hold is that they are in a departmentalized setting, often in a middle and high school, where they are rotating through knowledge-rich subjects, just like was mentioned earlier. So they're rotating through math, science, social studies, reading, and they're looking at those very often as siloed subjects. And then if you add intervention on top of that, that is another thing that they are rotating through and that they are making their way through. And so we created Lift because we really wanted to bring a cohesive experience to those teenagers where we could show through a program that we understand the unique challenges that they have of trying to balance everything. Similarly, the teachers of teenagers, as the folks on this webinar know, there is a lot to balance when you are teaching both a core curriculum and an intervention. And we really want intervention to be deeply supportive of the work that students are doing in the core curriculum. With older students, we have to give a lot of support at the same time, and this really helps us to do that. The reverse is also true. We also want the work that students are doing in their core subjects to support and accelerate them in their interventions. And so we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how this works soon, but that's a key framing for our work today. And as I mentioned, it is built for older students. It is designed specifically for teens. Um, it includes both decoding and fluency support. So looking at those as two pathways that are not necessarily distinct, they are progression. So students start in a decoding pathway and they progress into a fluency pathway. And then we center Lift around really, really engaging texts. And we heard about this. We heard about the need on the ground for Lyft through a whole host of platforms, from Reddit to Facebook to Instagram to interviews that we had with teachers and focus groups, and looking at feedback that we've gotten on our existing decodable books. For a while, we had these amazing decodable chapter books that were out there, and we had teachers who were using them who asked for something more. They asked for a larger program around those decodables. And so Lyft came out of a very, very, very organic need and an organic partnership between us and the Hill for Literacy, which is a professional learning organization that we partnered with so that we can use their evidence-based instructional routines and pair them with our texts. And I'm going very quickly and I'm sharing a lot of information. So I just want to reiterate that you are welcome to ask questions throughout this. You do not need to wait until the Q&A. And we will make sure that there is ample time left so that we can answer those questions. So Lyft has several components. We have engaging books. We have engaging decodable and high-low chapter books. The decodable books pair with the decoding lessons, and the high-low chapter books pair with the fluency lessons. We also have a very comprehensive educator manual. It's hefty. It is over 300 pages, but there is an implementation session that comes with every single Lyft package, where one of the things that we do at Storyshares is we work with educators and we show them how to navigate this manual, because you do not need all of it at once. And just like we want to provide scaffolds for our students, we also really want to provide scaffolds for educators who are trying a new program. We know that that is, pun intended, a big lift. And so we want to make it a lower lift as much as we can. We also have student workbooks and additional student materials. We have letter sound cards that really center the experiences of older striving readers with keywords that are really relevant to them, and especially to newcomers and multilingual learners. And then we have teacher training. We have our implementation sessions that come with the program. We also have coaching that we offer for ongoing support. That is an additional resource that we can provide. And then we can also connect folks with our partner, the Hill for Literacy, which provides an asynchronous 10-hour course that dives very deep into every single part of the lesson plan, so that an educator who does not have a background, and maybe a middle school ELA teacher who was in my position when I first started teaching middle school ELA, where I did not have a background in phonics instruction or fluency instruction, that the asynchronous course will still teach them how to very successfully execute and adapt the lessons that are part of Lyft. So those are the general components. And I am going to dive deep into each of them and share how they connect back to grade level rigor. So Lyft uses a backwards design model. And we're all teachers here, so everyone knows what backwards design and is familiar with backwards design, but we have an objective and everything is designed from that with that objective in mind. Our decoding lessons actually have two objectives, which I will get into in a moment, both a foundational skills objective and a grade level one. But ultimately, we're doing some backwards planning from the core goal of a literacy intervention program, which is not to get students to read individual words. It is to get students to read books and to have, and sorry, my voice just went out for a second, to read books and to develop their identity as a reader. And so when we do that, we really want to make sure that we are centering connected text practice as a key part of the intervention. So often, literacy intervention programs do a really wonderful job on the explicit instruction and the phonics concept, and students become successful at reading individual words, maybe individual phrases, maybe sentences. And then the last step is for them to read a connected text. And I don't know about anyone else, but I very rarely got to the last part of my curriculum because time is a very scarce resource, especially for secondary teachers. And so we brought up the connected text practice, and everything that we do informs it. So the connected text is the core of every single lesson. And the connected texts that we've chosen have very knowledge-rich and interdisciplinary content in them, while still being fiction books so that students can maintain that really high level of engagement. In many cases, we pair informational texts with the fiction books so that students are able to gain that background knowledge. We also really view this as a continuum of literacy learning. So the goal is not for students to master foundational skills for the sake of being able to read those individual words. We really want to enable students to scaffold up their skills so that they can access grade level content. And so when we do that, we really want to view this as looking at the core curriculum as informing the intervention and the intervention as informing the core curriculum. So we are pairing rigorous grade level standards for middle and high school with interdisciplinary knowledge building texts and a lot of opportunities for oral language development and discussion in every single lesson. And we are putting that straight into the intervention program. So the intervention still includes explicit phonics instruction, lots of fluency practice, and foundational skills work so that students can access the content in their core classes, but we are also using the information and the content and the skills from their core classes in the lessons themselves. And then this next part is something that we are really passionate about at Storyshares and have seen an increasing need for. We don't know the students who are going to use LIFT. We know the age range. We know that it's for students in grades 6 through 12, but we are not in the classroom on the ground with the students most of the time. And as a result, we really want to empower teachers who are implementing LIFT to use the lessons that they are handed as starting points rather than as a definitive script. We designed LIFT because we know that adolescent striving readers need a nuanced, structured literacy solution that is tailored really uniquely to them. And teachers need to be trained in how to provide space to connect LIFT to the core curriculum. And that is where this process of lesson internalization really comes into play. In both the initial implementation session that comes with part of this and in the educator manual, we teach educators how to take pre-planned foundational skills lessons and adapt them to connect to the very specific core curricula that they use in the classroom. So we provide educators with templates like the ones you're seeing here, examples, trainings, and pathways to facilitate those super important connections. And we do that through really showing where in the lesson there's space to change some things. So for example, it might make sense to change a dictation sentence to reinforce some core knowledge that is being studied in history. So if students are learning about the US Constitution and they have Um, and maybe they are really working on writing a thesis for an essay about the US Constitution. Their dictation sentence can become a sample thesis for that essay. That is just one small example, but we definitely want to do these lessons with fidelity and to also balance that with a flexible model so that the lessons can also really reinforce core content. And this is what a decoding lesson looks like. So I'm going to zoom into a bunch of different parts of this, but these are all the different things that you get. So this is a lesson plan. These pair with instructional routines that are scripted. So there are scripts that are available, and scripts are like a scaffold. They can be removed once the educator feels like they have mastered them. The scripts do come from the Hill for Literacy, the partnership that I mentioned before, and they have been used in schools for years now with great success. So each of these steps, this says Hill Step, and they pair with one of those scripts and one of those instructional routines. We filled in the content that connects back to the connected text. So the connected text for the decoding lessons are the These First Letters decodable series, and the focus is very much so on multisyllabic decoding to support those older striving readers with strategies that they can use immediately when they encounter multisyllabic words, not just in the intervention, but in their classes across the curriculum. And then there are opportunities for irregular word practice, for regular word practice that reinforce the phonics concept. There are letter sound cards for all 6 syllable types, and the letter sound cards support students in learning in a very multisensory way and in understanding that grapheme phoneme connection as they work on the most foundational skills. They're paired with keywords that are easy for multilingual learners to understand and that are also opportunities for language acquisition. And we use real pictures instead of cartoons or illustrations to really reflect what we have learned is a best practice for representation for older striving readers. So any pictures we use feature teenagers as well. We also have vocabulary cards to support that language acquisition in relation to the connected text practice, and students have workbook pages so that they are able to really take ownership of their learning. Okay, I'm going to dive in really deep into every single part of this lesson. So you are going to start seeing some screenshots of very specific chunks of this lesson that are designed to connect directly back to grade level rigor. So this is an example from the first decoding lesson. There are 2 objectives. Students will read closed syllable words with short vowel sounds, A, E, and I, at, and it. And then the second objective is students will explain how the main character's point of view is developed throughout the first chapter. And this connects to the Common Core Reading Literature Standard, the 6th standard for middle school, and which is to explain how an author develops the point of view of the narrator. And so we have that foundational skills objective to support students as they progress through the phonics-based scope and sequence. So the foundational skills objective ties directly into that larger scope and sequence, and students are also able to really practice it in the phonics guide for that chapter. We also have a standards aligned objective that really anchors that connected text practice. So when students are reading the decodable chapter, with rigorous grade level comprehension strategies. Our decodables tell really big stories with a lot of text control. And we want to take advantage of and leverage the largeness of those stories to support students with their comprehension skills as they are learning decoding as well. Then they do the text reading. This is after they do a lot of word work, and the word work is part of the foundational skills objective. We are not trying to make a connection. We're not trying to force a connection between every single part of the lesson plan. The text reading really leverages that grade level objective and it also supports language acquisition. So we introduce interdisciplinary vocabulary and we use evidence-based routines to look at the difference between rich words and narrow words. This is a term that our partner Hill uses to describe what might otherwise be known as tier two versus tier three vocabulary. So words that can be used across multiple content areas, or words that students are using very frequently, like the word confused, even the word sketch, which might have a different meaning depending on context, versus the words comics and dumplings. So there are different routines based on the types of words that students are encountering, and those are all in the educator manual. And these cards are also available as part of the program. Students are then encouraged to use the words in discussion and in their written responses. So they have multiple at-bats and multiple opportunities to practice using the vocabulary words. And there's also, when they have those multiple at-bats and multiple opportunities to practice using vocabulary words, we have also found that they are much more likely, and we've gotten a lot of teacher feedback that is to this point, to then go ahead and use those vocabulary words in other content areas and throughout the school day. We also have a whole section of the lesson plan called UpLIFT, and these are extension activities that connect back to the grade level standard. I say extension because one of the key parts of our implementation work with LIFT is looking at the school day and the school schedule. Programming is one of the largest hurdles to literacy intervention in a secondary environment. So we know that some schools might only have 30 minutes for an intervention, in which case they might not have time to do an extension or they might not have time to do more than one extension. We are also working with a school that is implementing LIFT in a 65-minute block that they are able to have every single school day, which is amazing. That is the other end of that spectrum. In a 60-minute block, we have enough, or in a 65-minute block, we have enough in the lesson plan that is substantial to fill up that time. In a 65-minute block, you would do every single extension. If you have a 30 to 45-minute block, you would do 1 to 2 extensions and you would rotate through the types of extensions. So one day you might do discussion, the next day you might do written response, and then the day after that you might do multiple choice or any kind of permutation thereof. These extensions provide opportunities to really assess students based on the objective in ways that inform the following day's instruction, to practice the skills emphasized in grade level Common Core standards, to develop oral language through open-ended discussion prompts, and to refine reading and writing skills through responding. And that is something that we're also going to zoom in on in a moment, that written response piece, which is something that is very key to this approach. And then we also want to vary and diversify the ways that students are responding to text and the ways that they're being assessed on the same objective. So these are all of the different ways that students can extend their learning as part of LIFT, and these also live in their workbooks. So you can see that right here. So this is a sample workbook page with the extension activities. They include sentence stems. And these sentence stems are scaffolds for students as well to express their thinking. And teachers can collect and are encouraged to collect these workbooks at the end of every intervention lesson to really assess their students' comprehension and writing, in addition to their students' foundational literacy skills. A huge piece that is needed to connect intervention and core curriculum is writing. Literacy interventions often do a really phenomenal job of teaching students foundational reading skills. I personally, and often even foundational spelling skills, I have yet to encounter a student who is a striving reader who is not also a striving writer and working on those foundational writing skills. And so we really want to support students in tracking their own progress with a proofreading checklist. So they have a proofreading checklist that they are able to use not only as part of LIFT, but in every single class that they are in throughout the school day. The goal is for them to use this until these different skills are ingrained and they know to proofread for these. But this is a page in their workbook. It is also at the ends of their writing prompts, and we also have it as a reproducible page. Teachers who choose to implement LIFT have year-long access to the LIFT Resource Hub on the Storyshares website. And that is a resource hub where we constantly add in pages that can be um, that teachers and students can print out and use as needed for their students so that they can use them across all their different subjects. I'm going to take a moment now and zoom into the fluency lesson, but I'm also going to just give everyone 15 seconds for think time. If you have any questions about this decoding piece, please go ahead and drop them in the chat so that we can try to answer them at the end of our webinar today. Okay, definitely feel free to keep using that Q&A tool in the chat um, as much as you need. So for our fluency lessons, we pair the fluency lessons um, with a high-low book, and we have four different high-low books that students cycle through. They are some of our most engaging titles at StoryShares. And this one is a skateboarding story, and they students have access to a fluent reading checklist. So we are supporting students with not only understanding content specific vocabulary, we are also supporting them with understanding the vocabulary involved in learning to read. So when or learning those foundational reading skills, if I were to work with a first grader in learning foundational reading skills, I would not necessarily tell them the definition of the word accuracy. I might instead say, we want to make sure that we are sounding out each part of the word that we can and blending the sounds together so that we can make sure that we are reading the words as they are written. Um, that is that might be how I would explain it to a much younger student. For an older student, I would teach them what the word accuracy means and what it means in this context. And in that way, we are also building and developing their vocabulary. Every fluency lesson is also paired with vocabulary cards. These big card decks are part of this program. We also have student workbooks as well. So I'm going to zoom into an objective. There is to really emphasize the link between fluency and comprehension, which is very apparent in all of the research done on fluency, is that there is a very strong link between fluency and comprehension. We decided that the main objective that students and teachers will be responsible for as part of the fluency lessons will be a standards aligned grade level comprehension objective, because that's our end goal here. And the fluent reading will inform all the work that they do towards meeting this objective. So I chose to, for the sake of showing you all the same objective or the same standard that we used for the decoding lesson as reflected in the fluency lesson. So students will explain how the author develops Luke's point of view throughout the passage. Luke is the narrator in a skateboarding story, and students are explaining how the author develops Luke's point of view throughout the passage by first, as they read, looking at how Luke's emotions change as the passage progresses. And they are filling out a graphic organizer going from the beginning of the passage to the middle of the passage to the end of the passage. And they have an extension activity that also accompanies that so that they're doing a lot of pre-work before they even get into a writing prompt that is associated with this. Then we have a lot of background building, and this happens in the very first part of the lesson. So what we do with the background building is we also aim to really show some interdisciplinary connections here. So in one of the books that students are reading, for the fluency lessons. It takes place in a very mountainous region in China, and so students might need to learn a lot about that region. And they might need to rely on some informational text to learn about that region. So we provide a lot of text lists that students can reference to support them in learning about that. We also have another book it's called Conch Tales, that's part of the fluency lessons, that focuses on um, a lot on the ocean and on water and on currents and on different scientific concepts that are associated with all of these. And so we are also supporting students in understanding that by giving them a lot of background knowledge. And supporting them in also finding the background knowledge on their own by giving them really knowledge-rich supplemental texts that are written at their grade level, that we are supporting them with scaffolds to understand. Similarly, our vocabulary gets increasingly more interdisciplinary as students progress through the program. So they're learning science vocabulary, some math vocabulary, a lot of history vocabulary, as they read the different books. So our aim was really to look at what core curricula does, and pair it with what an intervention program does, and to see how we could align the two, to take a new look at what has previously been considered reading remediation and figure out how we can explicitly and simultaneously address those rigorous core standards. So these are some of the supplemental resources we have. We have written response to reading that uses a lot of scaffolds. We have graphic organizers. We have ways to pair accessible texts with grade level texts and looking at the skills, those key comprehension skills, as that link between them all. There are some resource links that we are going to share with all of you to a digital sampler that includes a lot of information from our educator manual. It is a big chunk of it. An overview of this whole idea of UpLIFT, of connecting LIFT, literacy intervention for teens, up to grade level standards, as well as a one-pager in case you are interested in sharing about this program with other folks who are interested. A lot of this is also, um, we're a new program and we are trying to build awareness around not just the program itself, but this whole idea that we can actually do this work with the core curriculum and with intervention simultaneously in ways that are mutually supportive. And so we would always appreciate any feedback that you have and any opportunity to spread the word to other people who might need resources like these as well. We have some time for a Q&A. I would love to hear any questions that you have, and I will have Melanie share out the questions, and I will do my best to answer them and or direct to further resources.
Yeah, we have a question from Melissa. She said this is pretty specific to her school and order, but that's okay. We love a very specific question. She's wondering, because she purchased Lyft in its different components, how she's going to access the hub and how she can access the training, the implementation session.
That's a great question. So access to the hub comes with the educator manual, which you will get. So it is the inside cover of the educator manual has a password to the hub and a link to it. So you're good to go there. And for the implementation session, I will get back to everyone on that. For additional coaching or that asynchronous course through Hill, those are additional and beyond the scope of that initial purchase. But we are always happy to work with folks to make sure that you get access to whatever you need to get access to for successful implementation. Any other questions? Okay. If you have any additional questions, I would love to hear from you. My email is just Shira@storyshares.org. And we will have some additional information up in a moment to share how you can get in touch. And yes, there is a lot of excitement for this program, and we are extremely excited to this UpLIFT addition to Lyft, really connecting it very tightly to grade level standards, is a newer development. It is a whole layer of revisions that we built into the program really intentionally, and we had a lot of folks working on it. So we are very, very excited for this framing to be a core part of this first year of implementation. I will also add, I know that there are folks on here from a variety of states. And I mentioned Common Core state standards, and there are a lot of states with state-specific standards. What we do at Storyshares is we do a lot of alignment work. So we can align the different lessons in Lyft that are aligned with different Common Core standards to state-specific standards as well. So if that is ever a barrier for adoption or purchasing of a program like Lyft, it shouldn't be, because we will do that work on the back end to make sure that there is alignment and very clear pathways to connecting to the core curriculum, whatever standards are used as part of that. And we'll be candid if there's a point of misalignment, but we have actually found that at least 9 times out of 10, the alignment works really, really nicely. Melanie, I hand it over to you.
To talk about the next webinar.
Yeah.
Okay. So our next webinar coming up in September is talking about how we can reimagine assessment, think about it a little bit differently for secondary striving readers. We are hoping to have some school leaders, principals on a panel there. We don't have that totally confirmed yet, but it's going to be another one of those panel discussions. So super interesting. And if you scan that QR code, you can sign up for our newsletter, which will give you more information, send out the link when it's available, all of that.
Thank you. So we would love for you to stay in touch, and please, please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions, comments, concerns. We love them all.
Thank you everyone so much for joining us. We will send out an email with a link to this recording and also a link to the slideshow so that you'll have all those links that were in there. And we hope to see you at our next webinar in September. And if you're headed back to school soon, good luck.
Yes.
You are. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.